For Oliver, however, the first light of the new year brought with it a fresh wave of resolve. The promise of an external review, a possible lifeline, was more potent than any New Year cheer, holding the shimmering possibility of a reality that he had seemingly come to terms with as unattainable. Word of the additional scrutiny his case was under permeated the world inside the bars. Grumbles of a possible retrial and whispered speculations replaced the usual rumors and tales that routinely floated through the prison's dank corridors. Hope, a fragile commodity within the cold confines of Lockhaven, found new vigor amongst the prisoners. If Oliver Kane, a man they'd come to believe was wrongfully accused, could find a glimmer of light in his fight for justice, then perhaps they could, too. Grace faced the new year with an exhausted fervor that twisted her usual holiday melancholy into a determined stride. With confirmation of the additional investigation into Oliver's case, her sense of desolation was superseded by a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't allow herself the luxury of fatigue or surrender. Not when she was closer than ever to pulling apart the threads of the prosecution's story, one that she had been fighting tooth and nail to expose as a facade. Detached from the hustle and bustle of city life, the town of Crestwood started the new year quietly. Conversations around Oliver's case, however, had seeped through its time-worn bricks and cobblestones, burrowing into the heart of the tight-knit community. At the Crestwood Gazette, the consistent updates about Oliver's case, cleverly interwoven in Penelope's columns, snapped the town's medieval sleepiness into a subtle undercurrent of apprehension. The sudden scrutiny on an otherwise forgotten case sparked a domino effect of local chatter, the emerging details captivating attention much like a thriller unfolding in real time. In the smothering solitude of prison life, the relentless grind of days began to bear the weight of possibility. Oliver found his freedom not beyond the walls of Lockhaven, but within his very existence, in the reassurances from Grace, the discoveries unearthed by Harrison, the empathy of his fellow prisoners. Amidst the bleak canvas of Lockhaven, Oliver Kane discovered a different kind of freedom, one defined not by absence of physical constraints but by the power to hope and to continue fighting for his truth. As winter's chill began to relent, giving way to the faint promise of spring, the inmates of Lockhaven Penitentiary languished in the monotonous rhythms of confinement. Oliver, however, found himself caught in the tides of change that swept through the barred windows and ironclad doors of his cell. Conversations with Marcus evolved into something more profound than passing the time. They spoke of guilt and innocence, right and wrong, challenging each other's beliefs in the unforgiving light of their shared reality. For Oliver, these discussions were punctuated by reflective pauses, the undertow of each word compelling him to assess the measure of his own guilt, guilt not defined by the law, but by his perceived failure to protect Ethan and the impact his imprisonment had on Grace and Lucy. Marcus, sensing Oliver's internal struggle, offered a differing perspective. Guilt ain't always where you think it is, Kane, he mused one afternoon, his voice carrying the rough edges of experience. It's the echo of what we think we did or didn't do. But the truth? It's often buried deeper than we can dig. Meanwhile, Grace's days were consumed by a relentless pursuit of justice. With each stack of legal documents and reports she rifled through, each consultation with Tom Harrison, she uncovered fragments of evidence that whispered of the greater truth that eluded her, a truth that seemed to recede further with every step forward. An unexpected breakthrough came when Harrison secured a meeting with a disgruntled former detective who had worked on Oliver's case. Over a clandestine coffee in a nondescript diner, the retired officer spoke of procedural hesitations and a peculiar push from superiors to streamline the investigation towards a quick resolution. Back in Crestwood, the town's undercurrent of doubt thickened, subtly altering the social dynamics. Once clear-cut opinions about Oliver's guilt now shimmered with ambiguity as the community grappled with the possibility of his innocence. Whispers at the local cafe, once dismissive, now held a different timbre, a questioning note that resonated with the revelations unfolding within the Gazette's investigative pieces. Grace, haunted by the shadows of the past and the echoes of guilt that sought to undermine her resolve, channeled her struggles into action. A chance encounter with Penelope at a local grocery store led to a tacit alliance. The journalist's tenacity and Grace's determination interwove, producing a narrative that slowly coaxed the suspicions of Crestwood's residents out from the dark corners of private discourse into the public arena. The prison, an entity unto itself, remained unaffected by the perennial thaw that crept over the town. Yet, within its cold embrace, change was palpable. Oliver's forthcoming appeal, bolstered by new evidence and the community's divided convictions, fanned the embers of optimism within him. It was during one of the mind-numbingly routine headcounts that a guard passed Oliver a note, a hastily scribbled message from Grace. It held but a few words, yet in them, Oliver found an affirmation of hope that reverberated louder than the clang of his cell door. Hold on, we're close. As the days turned warmer, Crestwood found itself in the grip of an unexpected spring awakening. The quaint town had become the center of nationwide attention, its peaceful facade riddled with the intrusive glare of media outlets and the reverberations of Oliver's case. The modest Crestwood Gazette, once known for its regional dispatches and community updates, now held sway over a growing readership well beyond town borders. Penelope's articles on Oliver's case had become an unexpected nationwide sensation, casting a probing spotlight on Crestwood's quiet corners and sparking an avalanche of public interest. Scenes from Grace's backyard, quiet streets, and the familiar brick and mortar of Crestwood's municipal buildings now flashed across screens and print news. The journalists descending on the town brought not only their cameras but a sense of disruption, an invasive exposure that the community had never prepared for. In the heart of the mailish media frenzy, Grace found herself the reluctant protagonist of a narrative that snaked its way out from the dusty files on her living room table to the glaring headlines of national dailies. Each press junket and interview felt like a tightrope walk, weighing the urgency of advocating for Oliver against the personal cost of public scrutiny. While Crestwood reeled under the weight of the unfamiliar media invasion, Lockhaven Prison, in stark contrast, remained untouched by the fervor. The tumultuous world outside remained a distant hum to the inmates except for Oliver, who bore the brunt of his life becoming televised fodder. The fame, or rather, the infamy, brought about a strange celebrity status for Oliver within Lockhaven. Prison guards who had once barely acknowledged him now watched with a mix of intrigue and suspicion. Inmates, too, became increasingly aware of his case's notoriety, their initial disdain melting into a grudging respect for the man they'd once dismissed as a child killer. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Grace remained steadfast in her pursuit of truth. Each revealed inconsistency, every uncovered piece of overlooked evidence, fortified her resolve. She navigated her way through challenging press conferences, perfectly crafted rebuttals against the prosecution, and countless night vigils poring over Detective Tom Harrison's case files. As the once dormant town came alive under the scrutiny of the nation, so too did dormant detractors of Oliver. Fred Turner, now living in the outskirts of Crestwood, unable to shake off the last vestiges of his past association with Oliver, found himself drawn back into the unfolding drama. Caught in the crossfire of reborn public interest, he watched the development with a mix of schadenfreude and concealed apprehension. If Crestwood was under a magnifying glass, so too was he. But like a moth to a flame, Fred found himself compelled towards the heat of the unfolding debate. As media interest in Oliver's case continued to mount, Crestwood's transformation from a sleepy town to a bustling hub of investigative journalists became impossible to ignore. The constant scrutiny began to chip away at the solidarity that had once united its residents despite their differing opinions. While Penelope continued to probe for truths concealed under layers of bureaucratic red tape and small-town politics, Oliver's case unraveled into a complex tapestry of conjecture, old grudges, and freshly unearthed secrets. Fred Turner, once a minor key player in the narrative, found himself thrust into the spotlight as Penelope delved deeper into his history with Oliver. Sketching an alternative perspective for the readers, the journalists started to map the crisscrossing lines of their relationship, exploring every crevice for a hint of motive and opportunity. Fred's own history, unsettling parallels with his father's behavior, and his escalating resentment towards Oliver began to form a narrative that questioned his bitterness under a more sinister light. In the heart of the restless town, Grace navigated her days on a tightrope of hope and apprehension. She drew strength from her daughter Lucy, whose resilience in the face of their stormy reality had become the lighthouse guiding her through the ceaseless tempest. Deeper within the walls of Lockhaven, news of the amplified interest in Oliver's case dribbled in, transforming the mundane routine into a silent crescendo of speculation and guarded hope. Letters penned by readers and sympathizers began to trickle in for Oliver, each envelope a tangible token of the increasing support for his case. Their contents varied from heartfelt empathies to fervent exhortations of his innocence, but each offered a lifeline that reached out to him in his isolation. Marcus, ever his steadfast comrade, watched as Oliver began to engage with the letters, using them as a bridge to the outside world, a thread to weave his growing hope around. The growing camaraderie between the inmates and Oliver fused into a stubborn sense of solidarity, a testament to the transformation of their perception of him. At the same time, Tom Harrison doggedly pursued the leads opening up in the case. Pushing for a retrial, he strategized around the media pressure and public interest, crafting a defense stronger than ever before. Just as the budding trees of Crestwood were shaking off their winter slumber, so too was the long-scattered evidence surrounding Oliver's case. Seasoned detective Tom Harrison, relentless in his pursuit of the truth, systematically dismantled the prosecution's claims, each fallen piece cementing his belief in Oliver's innocence. Back in the confines of Lockhaven Penitentiary, Oliver clung to these revelations like a lifeline. Excitement rippled through the prison as news of the possible retrial seeped in, whispering promises of hope and freedom. Tenuous bonds of camaraderie had grown stronger in these shared moments of anticipation, fostering a peculiar sense of community within the prison walls. As the spotlight of national interest continued to focus on Crestwood, Penelope found herself increasingly intertwined with the Kane family's fate. She watched as the underdog of her story morphed into a symbol of systemic failures and miscarried justice. Her columns, now vibrant threads in the daily consumption of news nationwide, delivered blows to the initial conviction with each betrayal of truth she unearthed. Caught in the tidal wave of public sentiment, Fred Turner felt his once familiar world flaking away under the weight of suspicion. With his unsettling past exposed and his connection with Oliver scrutinized, he watched as the dark underbelly of his life became a talking point in the bustling pubs, quiet cafes, and even in the national dailies. For Grace, the tides of public sentiment and unwavering media interest offered validation for her relentless fight. The newfound public empathy and the increasing odds of a retrial amplified her hopes, widening the chasm between her cautious optimism and the looming dread of another disappointment. Even so, the prospect of witnessing justice held her steady in the ensuing whirlwind. Meanwhile, the once sleepy town of Crestwood braced itself under the media microscope. The microcosm of a community found their lives invaded and their certainties challenged. Oliver's case had effectively stirred their calm neighborhoods into a tumultuous stage for justice and morality, forcing them to question the foundations of trust and truth they had built their lives on. Within the drab confines of his prison cell, Oliver found a strange solidarity burgeon amongst his fellow inmates. Instead of his criminal record defining him, it was his fight for justice that resonated within the constricting prison walls, amplifying the faith in his innocence. Outside the prison walls, Oliver's name echoed in the fervor of public opinion while he found tranquility within his confinement. But the piece was a saboteur, weaving a cocoon of acceptance even as the external world churned for his freedom. One cool spring day, a simple, cream-colored letter arrived for Oliver. Beyond the steady influx of support mail and news clippings, this envelope was unassuming. A stark contrast to the colorful stamps and heartfelt scrawls that usually marked his letters of solidarity. Yet, it would prove to be the most impactful of messages he'd received. Opening it, he found a single piece of paper inside, an aid worker's handwriting adorning its surface. As he read, Oliver's face paled. His fingers trembled lightly on the paper. It bore a message from Ethan, a letter composed only weeks before the school tragedy that had claimed his son's life. The letter was simple, full of innocent observations and childhood dreams, speaking of a future that tragically never came to be. But it was the ending that struck him the most. It read, "I know you're scared, Dad. But remember what you always tell me, bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's having the courage to face it. You are the bravest man I know. Love, Ethan." Tears welled up in Oliver's eyes, blurring the inked words. He was transported back to his last memory of Ethan, the echo of their shared laughter, the warmth of the small hand that once fit in his. His own fear, uncertainty, and regret manifested in the wish suspended in his son's heartfelt words. Far away from Lockhaven, in the juxtaposed freedom of Crestwood, Grace was grappling with a revelation. Her efforts to expose the corruption tainting Oliver's case had led her to an unexpected clue, a thread tied intricately to their past. The sudden insight, as illuminating as it was overwhelming, promised to shake the very foundations of their fight for justice. As Grace and Detective Harrison delved into this newfound evidence, the pieces of the treacherously complex puzzle began morphing into a clear image, an image that held the possibility to change the trajectory of Oliver's fate. The gargantuan struggle for justice had nudged the rock to the summit. As the community of Crestwood followed the unfolding drama, the unraveling pieces of evidence etched a revised narrative of Oliver's case, one that stood on the precipice of a significant victory. In the grim solitude of his prison cell, Oliver clutched Ethan's letter, finding within his son's earnest words an unexpected catalyst. The bravery that colored his son's perceptions of him was now a torch in the encroaching darkness, a call to arms to face the daunting amalgamation of hope and despair. As the novelty of spring gave way to the sultriness of summer, the atmospheric shifts were mirrored within the intensely scrutinized walls of Crestwood and Lockhaven prison. The town's placid tempo was disrupted by the anticipation of Oliver's trial reopening. It was a cacophony of whispers and conjectures, each revelation about the case like thunder echoing through the once peaceful haven. Within the prison, anticipation hummed through the concrete walls, the inmates' fervors growing in tandem with each news scrap they managed to scrounge from the outside world. Lockhaven was abuzz with whispers of corruption, talks of freedom, and particularly for Oliver, the redemptive power of innocence. Amidst the hovering uncertainty, Oliver found refuge in Marcus' company. His friend's stoic approach balanced the fluctuating tides of promise and despair. Marcus was both a sounding board and a perceptive advisor. His intuitive understanding of Oliver's state was often the anchor he desperately needed. Grace approached the trial's reopening with the fervor of a woman single-mindedly seeking justice for her family. Yet, beneath her determination lay a stirring unease. The newly discovered clue had thrown light onto harrowing possibility, a deception that seemed far-fetched but was now impossible to ignore. As she navigated the labyrinth of Oliver's case, Grace became a fierce proponent of truth. Together with Detective Harrison, they pieced together the intricate quilt of discrepancies, corrupted procedures, and unchaste leads. What was once a case fraught with assumptions soon revealed itself as an enigma of unpursued leads and skewed interpretations. While Oliver grappled for peace amidst the brewing storm, an unexpected contact drew Grace a step closer to the truth. Fred Turner. His decision to participate in a televised interview blew open a Pandora's box of suspicion and intrigue long dormant. Fred Turner's voice, once merely a distant echo in Crestwood's past, now resounded with disquieting doubt. His apparent awareness of Oliver's psychological struggle cast a long shadow over the collective conscience of the audience, a shadow that sidelined him from the role of mere observer and made him a key player in this twisted narrative. The echoes from the past had begun to resonate within the lives of Oliver Kane, Grace, Fred Turner, the residents of Crestwood and Lockhaven's inmates, reaching a sobering crescendo at the verge of the impending trial. The delicate dance of deception, truth, and redemption was teetering on the edge of a revelation that promised to redefine every character in this story. As the gavel fell with a defining thud, it marked the commencement of the reopening of Oliver's case. The courtroom, abuzz with the echoing whispers of speculation, stilled in dread anticipation. Media personnel, spectators, and legal entities, all eyes in the room trained on the solitary figure that was Oliver Kane. The undeniably significant day kicked off with the prosecutor's opening statement, a carefully rehearsed assault on the defense's motive to vacate Oliver's conviction. However, amidst the prosecutor's contrived assurance, uncertainty began blooming like an unwelcome weed. A stunning revelation from Detective Harrison about the prosecution's failure to investigate alternative suspicions cast an undeniable shadow over the previously airtight conviction. Yet, within the boisterous hustle of the courtroom drama, Oliver found himself adrift in the quiet mourning of his past life. The presence of his loving wife, stolen glances exchanged with Grace, only deepened the chasm between his locked present and yearned for future.